My name is Madeline, and I was abandoned by my own parents in a foreign country with no phone, no ID, and no way home. Their last words echoed as they laughed from the back of a cab. Let's see how you get back. But they didn't know that leaving me broken would be the start of my strength. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know. And if you've ever been blindsided by someone who was supposed to protect you, stick around. My story might feel hauntingly familiar. We were supposed to be celebrating. That's what they told me. This is a family trip, Madeline. A reset. So why was I standing alone, heart pounding in my ears, on a sun-drenched curb in Valencia while their cab sped off, my parents' laughter curling like smoke behind the rear windshield? My father, Curtis, was the first to slide into the taxi, tossing our shared hotel map onto the street like garbage. My mother, Joanne, leaned back just long enough to meet my eyes, smiling in that cold, mocking way that had replaced her warmth long ago. Let's see how you get back, she said as the door slammed shut. I didn't move, not right away. It felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. There I was, 23, newly graduated and halfway across the world from anyone who would actually answer a call from me. I had no phone, no purse, no passport. Just the sandals on my feet and the sting of humiliation blooming up my neck. It hadn't started like this. We were meant to heal our relationship. My parents had framed this trip to Spain as a graduation gift/intervention. They said I was too sensitive lately and needed a change of scenery. What they meant was, you make us uncomfortable with your boundaries, so we're dragging you somewhere where you can't escape. They hated that I'd started therapy. They hated that I'd stopped letting things slide. And now, apparently, they hated me enough to leave me stranded in a city where I didn't speak the language, didn't have a single cent in my pocket, and didn't even know which direction led back to the hotel. I picked up the crumpled city map from the gutter, fingers trembling. A couple walked past, giving me a puzzled glance. Did I look like a lost tourist? Or could they already see the truth? I wanted to scream, to chase the cab. But all I could do was stand there, still and seething, while the warm Mediterranean sun that had felt so welcoming just minutes ago now felt like it was burning right through my skin. My mother's last words before we started walking that morning had been sarcastic. Try not to get dramatic, Maddie. We're not in one of your stories. Well, Mom, this one's real. I tried to steady my breathing, think rationally. They couldn't possibly have meant it. This had to be a lesson, a twisted joke. Maybe they'd circle back in 5 minutes, but they didn't. 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20. I sat on a stone bench near the plaza, my palms slick with sweat. My throat was dry, but I couldn't bring myself to walk into any nearby cafe. What would I even say? I didn't have any money, no ID, no way to prove I was who I claimed to be. A seagull landed near my feet, pecking at something invisible. It was the only creature that didn't seem to mind I was unraveling. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a lesson. It was punishment. And for what? For daring to say during dinner last night that I didn't want to live at home anymore. For refusing to take my dad's side when he berated our waiter. For rolling my eyes at my mom's little digs about my weight, my hair, my attitude. They'd been looking for a way to teach me my place. And they'd found it. The part that scared me most wasn't the abandonment. It was how easy it seemed for them. So here's the question I keep turning over in my mind. What do you do when the people who raised you weaponize love into leverage? When they make survival a punishment? You keep watching. Because what came next changed everything. I didn't realize how far I'd wandered until my legs ached, and the golden tones of the city began to dissolve into a blur of unfamiliar streets. I clutched the wrinkled map like it held the answers to a life I no longer recognized. But the names on the paper meant nothing. Cal de la Paz, Cara de Colon. They all twisted into one another like a labyrinth designed to swallow me whole. I needed help. Not emotionally, not symbolically. I needed actual help, police, embassy, some kind of authority. But I couldn't even ask for water. I didn't speak Spanish, beyond what little I remembered from high school, and every time I tried to ask someone for directions, I could see the confusion flicker across their face. Eventually, I found a public square with a statue in the center and a kiosk that looked like it might be official. There was a man in uniform inside, talking on the phone. I waited until he hung up, then stepped forward. Hi, I'm lost, I said. I need to get to the police. I was robbed. He frowned. Policia, I nodded eagerly. Yes, police. He pointed vaguely toward the other side of the square and said something too quickly for me to catch. I nodded again, pretending I understood. Gracias, I muttered. It was a lie. I hadn't been robbed, not yet. But that changed 5 minutes later. I took a side street that seemed to follow the direction he'd indicated. The shops became sparser, the tourists thinned out, and the air grew thick with unease. I hadn't meant to stray from the main roads, but every turn I took felt like a mistake I couldn't undo. That's when I felt it. A hand brushed my shoulder, too familiar, too fast. I turned sharply, but no one was there. Then I felt it again. My backpack, light as it was, had been unclipped. The zipper dangled open like a wound. Not that there was much inside, just the hotel keycard, some tissues, and a cheap bottle of sunscreen. But the panic surged anyway. I spun around, searching for anyone suspicious. Everyone looked suspicious. I pressed myself against the wall of a building, trying to slow my racing heart. I felt like prey. And that's when I realized my passport, my ID, my phone, they had all been in the small crossbody purse I'd handed to my mom at breakfast so I could take a photo in front of the cathedral. She never gave it back. It hadn't just slipped her mind. She'd walked away with it, on purpose. I had nothing, not even $1. Not even a name that mattered in this city. Calm down, Madeline, I whispered to myself, my voice cracking. Just breathe, you're okay. But I wasn't. The panic clawed up my spine. People passed me on bicycles, in cars, chatting with friends, holding hands. The world moved forward, indifferent to the American girl slowly unraveling by a graffiti-covered alley. I kept walking, not sure what I was looking for, somewhere safe. Somewhere that would let me exist for a minute without judgment or danger. I rounded a corner and the shops vanished altogether. I was in a narrower alley now, the kind you only see in nightmares, shuttered doors, cracked pavement, the faint stink of garbage lingering in the air. A group of teenagers loitered at the far end, watching me with bored, unreadable expressions. I turned and walked briskly back the way I came. But the alleys didn't connect the way I thought they did. Every exit led to another wall, another dead end. The map in my hand crumpled. Useless. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't afford the luxury of falling apart. Instead, I kept moving. At some point, I tripped. A loose stone, maybe. My knee hit the ground hard enough to draw blood, and I sat there, dazed, watching it drip onto the sidewalk. No one helped. I wasn't even sure anyone saw. By the time I made it back to the edge of a main road, dusk was settling in, and my limbs trembled from exhaustion and fear. I sat on the curb, hugging my knees, trying to look invisible but also hoping someone, anyone, might notice me. They hadn't just abandoned me emotionally. They'd physically left me defenseless. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. All I wanted was to not disappear in a place that wouldn't remember my name. And yet, in that moment, as I sat under a lamplight blinking weakly into the evening, something shifted. I realized I wasn't waiting for them to come back anymore. I was waiting for me. Night came fast. Maybe it always did in a foreign place, when you had no bearings, no clock, and nothing but fear to fill the space between seconds. Rain had started. Not a soft drizzle, but a soaking, insistent downpour that flattened my hair and chilled my skin. I hadn't eaten in hours, hadn't even had water. My sandals squeaked with every step, slippery against the uneven pavement. Each droplet felt like a tap on the shoulder, reminding me I had nowhere to go. I scanned the shopfronts for any sign of life, any doorway left ajar. Most of them had already shut their gates tight. Metal grates. Locked doors, lights off. No open signs. Valencia was closing up and I wasn't part of it. My knee throbbed from the fall earlier. I could still feel the gravel embedded in the skin beneath my jeans. But the physical pain was distant now, overshadowed by the ache behind my ribs. That last look my mother gave me before the cab drove away. How had I not seen it coming? We'd argued, yes, about everything from my attitude to my refusal to take over the family business. But to leave me here like this? It had been a simple disagreement. I said I didn't want to stay in the hotel while they day-drank their way through the plazas. I wanted to go see the art museum. I wanted to spend one day doing something that didn't revolve around their moods. "You're not in charge, Maddie," my father had snapped. "She thinks everything's about her now," my mother added, sipping her sangria. "That therapist's got you all twisted up. You used to be fun." "Used to be obedient," Dad corrected. I didn't yell, I didn't curse, I just stood up and said I needed some air. And that's when the sarcasm started. "She needs air now," my mom said with a laugh. "God, this generation." The last thing I heard before the cab door slammed was my mother's voice, light and cutting. "Let's see how she gets back." And then silence. I found the florist shop around 10 p.m., tucked between a pharmacy and a boarded-up bookstore. Its faded green awning jutted just far enough over the stoop to keep out the worst of the rain. Beneath it sat an empty crate and a torn poster advertising Mother's Day roses. The irony hit hard. I pulled my knees to my chest and leaned against the shop's brick wall. The air smelled faintly of old flowers and wet cement. I was drenched, inside and out. My hair clung to my face, my clothes heavy and cold. I could feel a shiver starting in my spine and working its way out, like my body couldn't decide if it wanted to give up or fight. A car passed slowly, its headlights briefly illuminating my reflection in the florist's window. I didn't recognize the girl looking back at me. She looked small, defeated. Her mascara had bled down her cheeks and her lips were blue from cold. But her eyes, they were wide open. The thunder cracked overhead, and for a moment I imagined what my parents were doing right now. Were they back at the hotel sipping wine, scrolling through their phones, pretending I never existed? Or were they already on the plane home, leaving me behind like an extra suitcase they no longer wanted to carry? My fingers trembled as I reached into my jacket pocket, praying for something, anything. A receipt, a coin, a miracle, nothing, no ID, no credit card, no phone, no proof I existed. My stomach growled, reminding me that survival wasn't poetic. It was practical. But more than hunger, I felt the weight of something else pressing against my chest. Grief. Not for a lost item or opportunity. For a version of my parents that never existed. People tell you your parents love you unconditionally. That they'll protect you. That family is forever. But what happens when the people who brought you into the world are the very ones trying to break you? I stared out at the wet street, watching the puddles ripple as the rain came harder. A couple walked by under a giant umbrella, laughing at something I couldn't hear. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did, and I just didn't matter. Tears welled in my eyes again, this time not from fear, but from the aching need for one kind word, one safe place, one human who didn't see me as a burden. I curled tighter beneath the awning, arms wrapped around my legs like a cocoon. It didn't help. The wind still found its way in. The chill in my bones refused to leave. Somewhere in the distance, a clock tower struck midnight. I whispered to no one, "Happy graduation, Maddie." And then I cried. Not the silent kind of crying you do when you're trying to be strong. The real kind, the kind where your shoulders shake and your breath hitches and the whole world disappears in a blur. But even in the middle of that storm, in the dark, on a foreign street, soaked to the skin, some part of me knew I wasn't done yet. I would survive this, even if I had to do it alone. A low rumble of an engine pulled me out of my daze. At first, I thought I was imagining it, some leftover echo from the thunderstorm, but the glow of approaching headlights snapped me back. A sleek black car rolled slowly down the street, tires hissing against the wet pavement. It passed the florist shop, then paused. Just for a second, just long enough to make my heart hammer against my ribs. Please don't stop, or maybe please do. The car reversed gently, its window lowering with a mechanical hum. A face appeared, young, mid-20s maybe, with thoughtful eyes and a worried crease between his brows. His voice was soft but clear. "Estás bien?" Then, noticing my panic, he quickly switched to English. "Are you okay? You look lost." I couldn't speak. It was that awful moment when you need help but don't know how to ask. My throat locked. My arms tightened around my knees. I couldn't even nod. He didn't get out of the car, didn't pressure me, just leaned slightly toward the window and added, "I'm Noah. I volunteer nearby. I just finished a shift at the shelter." Shelter. That word hit something deep. I didn't know if it was true. I didn't know if he was safe. But for the first time in hours, his voice didn't sound sharp or mocking or tired of me. "You look freezing," he said gently. "Do you need a ride? I can take you to the police or the hospital, or," he paused, then softened further, "or just somewhere dry. I should have hesitated. All the warnings from every safety seminar I'd ever attended flashed through my mind. Don't get into cars with strangers. Don't trust someone just because they sound kind. Don't be a headline, but something in his eyes, steady, unhurried, respectful, slowed the fear. I don't have anything, I finally croaked. No phone, no ID. That's okay, he said. You don't need anything to deserve help. That line undid me. I wiped my face with a damp sleeve and tried to stand, wobbling slightly from the cold. He reached across the seat and pushed the passenger door open, but didn't get out. Didn't come closer, just left the decision to me. My hand hovered over the doorframe for a second longer than it should have. Then I got in. Warmth hit me like a wave. The heat vents were already on, and the car smelled faintly of coffee and something clean like eucalyptus. I curled into the seat, still dripping but grateful beyond words. He handed me a spare hoodie from the backseat without saying a word. I pulled it over my soaked clothes. It was oversized and smelled like detergent and rain. Familiar, human. I'm not usually like this, I mumbled. I don't normally cry on sidewalks. Noah smiled faintly, eyes still on the road as he pulled away from the curb. It's okay. Sidewalks are where a lot of real stuff happens. We drove in silence for a while, not the awkward kind, but the kind that feels like permission to breathe again. Streetlights flickered past the window, casting golden shadows across the dashboard. Want to tell me what happened? He asked eventually, voice calm. My parents left me, I whispered. They just left, on purpose. Noah didn't say anything for a long time. Then softly, some people don't deserve the titles they hold. I looked at him. He didn't pry, didn't ask what I did to deserve it. Didn't try to spin it into a learning moment. He just drove. You said you work at a shelter, I asked, needing to know I wasn't being foolish. He nodded. Yeah, youth outreach mostly. My mom and I help out part-time. I used to live in Seattle, but we moved back here after stuff. I didn't ask what kind of stuff. I understood now how precious it was when someone let you keep your secrets. I don't even know where I was, I said. I tried to find the police, but everything looked the same and the map was useless. I'll get you somewhere safe, Noah said. We're only about 15 minutes from my mom's place. We have a spare room and she keeps tea on tap. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. You don't even know me, I murmured. He glanced at me briefly, expression gentle. You don't look like someone trying to scam me. You look like someone who's been let down too many times. That did it. My eyes welled again, but I turned toward the window so he wouldn't see. When we finally pulled into a narrow drive lined with ivy and soft porch lights, something inside me sagged. Not in fear, but in cautious relief. The house was small but warm-looking, cozy, real. Noah parked and turned off the engine. You can wait here if you want, but my mom's gonna insist on feeding you. I nodded. Maybe this wasn't home. But it was the first place in a long time that didn't feel like a trap. The moment I stepped through the front door, warmth swallowed me whole. Not just the temperature, though it was blessedly warm, but the feeling. The scent of simmering lentils and something citrusy filled the air, wrapping around me like a protective hug. The soft hum of a Spanish radio station played in the background, barely louder than a whisper. And then I saw her. Elena, Noah's mother. She appeared from the kitchen wearing a faded apron and holding a ladle, her salt and pepper hair tied up messily, her eyes widening the second she saw me. Before I could say a word, she was by my side. Oh, Pobber Nina, she murmured, not unkindly, cupping my damp face gently. Her hands were warm and dry and smelled faintly of garlic and thyme. She said something quickly to Noah in Spanish, and I only caught pieces, but it didn't matter. I understood the tone. Concern, urgency, kindness. I found her near the city center, Noah explained. She was soaked and alone. She doesn't have a phone or anything on her. Elena's eyes darted to mine again, and she gave me a soft smile. You're safe now. You're staying here tonight. It wasn't a question. I wanted to protest, to say I can't impose, I don't even know you, but the words caught in my throat, because I didn't have the strength to argue with kindness. Elena motioned toward the hallway. Come, towels, you change, yes. Noah gently nudged me toward what turned out to be a small guest bathroom, and I stood there blinking at the pile of folded towels and a thick robe that looked like it belonged to someone's grandmother. I peeled off my soaked clothes with trembling hands. My jeans made a horrible sound as they separated from my skin, stiff with rain and street dust. I caught sight of myself in the mirror and flinched. I looked like someone who'd been forgotten. But the moment that robe touched my shoulders, something strange happened. I started to feel human again. I wrapped it tighter, buried my face in one of the towels, and just stood there, letting it all settle. I didn't know what I was feeling. Relief, embarrassment, grief, maybe all of it. When I stepped out, Alina was already setting a tray on a small table near the couch, steaming lentil soup in a ceramic bowl, slices of bread, and a mug of something herbal. Noah had disappeared, giving us space. Alina motioned for me to sit. I obeyed like a child, sinking into the couch as the blanket she'd draped over the armrest fell around my shoulders. "I know it's not fancy," she said in her lilting accent, "but it is warm and made with love." I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone said that word to me, love, even casually. It stung in the best way. "Thank you," I whispered. She sat across from me, her hands folded neatly, giving me space to eat before speaking again. "Your parents?" she asked gently. I hesitated. "They left me," I said. "We were supposed to be on a family trip, but we fought, and then they just left." I expected disbelief, pity, maybe judgment. But Alina only nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "people cannot carry the weight of their own cruelty, so they put it on others, on those who feel too much." I stared at her. "You seem like someone who feels deeply," she added. "That is a strength. But it means you must choose who you give your heart to. Not everyone is careful with it." My throat tightened. That's exactly how it felt. Like I'd handed my heart to people who had used it as leverage, as punishment. I looked down at the soup. My hands were steady for the first time since this all began. "Is it okay if I stay just tonight?" I asked. Alina smiled, then reached out to squeeze my hand. "Tonight, tomorrow, as long as you need. This is not charity. This is what people should do for each other." And for the first time in days, I didn't feel like a problem to be fixed or a lesson to be taught. I felt seen. After dinner, she handed me a clean pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt from Noah's closet and showed me to a small room down the hall. The bed was simple, the quilted blanket worn but clean. A lamp glowed softly beside the nightstand, and a small vase of dried lavender sat beside it. "Sleep," Alina said. "We talk more mañana." I nodded, my eyes already heavy. As she closed the door behind her, I slid under the covers, expecting the storm of thoughts to return. But they didn't. Instead, I fell asleep to the sound of the rain tapping gently against the windows. Not afraid, not ashamed, just warm. I woke to the scent of coffee and the sound of birds. For a split second, I forgot where I was. I stretched and looked around, heart skipping as I remembered this wasn't a hotel, or a couch, or an alley. This was a real bed in a real room with sunlight creeping in through gauzy curtains. The weight of everything didn't hit me the way it had the day before. It settled instead like a quiet ache, a bruise, not a break. I sat up slowly. The robe Alina had given me hung over the chair. My clothes from the night before had been washed and folded on the foot of the bed. My heart stuttered at the sight. She hadn't just helped. She'd cared. When I padded into the kitchen, Alina was already at the stove, humming softly as she flipped something golden in a pan. "Buenos dias," she said with a warm glance over her shoulder. "You slept well." I think so," I said, surprised by the truth of it. She gestured to the table where a plate of toast, sliced fruit, and a cup of coffee waited. "Sit, eat, then we plan." I took the chair slowly, every part of me still cautious. Noah walked in a few minutes later, hair still damp from a shower, and tossed a folder onto the table. "Embassy website's not super clear," he said, sliding into a seat across from me. "But I printed out the emergency passport forms and the list of what you'll need." "I don't have anything," I reminded him. "No ID, no phone, nothing." Alina set down a glass of juice in front of me. "We go together, I speak, you sign." I blinked. "You'll come with me." "Of course," she said simply. "No one should face bureaucracy alone." Noah grinned. "Especially not in Spain." I managed a small laugh. We spent the next hour filling out paperwork. Noah used his laptop to check embassy hours. Alina found an old envelope for me to use as a folder. I wrote out my full name, Madeline Lee Porter, and saw it in my handwriting for the first time in days. It felt like reclaiming something. Later that afternoon, we took a bus into the city. The embassy loomed tall and sterile, with glass doors and uniformed guards and a line of people trailing out onto the sidewalk. I hesitated. Alina nudged my elbow gently. "You are not asking for a favor. You are solving a problem." Inside, we waited over an hour. I felt like I was vibrating out of my skin. Every security beep, every clipboard shuffle made me flinch. Alina sat beside me calmly, knitting something blue and soft, like she did this every day. When it was finally our turn, the consular officer barely looked up as I approached the window. "Next, name." "Madeline Porter," I said, then quickly added, I lost my passport. I don't have any ID. My parents." Alina stood beside me and stepped in, her voice calm but firm, first in Spanish, then switching to accented English. "She was left alone. She is a U.S. citizen. She has no documents. She needs help." The officer blinked, suddenly paying more attention. He flipped through the forms Noah had helped me fill out. "Do you have any copy of your passport? A scan, email, anything?" I shook my head. "It was in my phone, but my voice broke. It's gone." To his credit, the man softened slightly. "Okay, we'll check the system. If you were issued a passport in the last 10 years, we can verify your identity. We'll need you to fill out a DS-64 for the lost document and a DS-11 for the new one. You'll need a photo, too." "There's a shop nearby," Alina offered. "We go now, then come back." And just like that, she took over. We got the photos. We returned to the embassy. Alina translated each step with patience. When I stumbled over my answers, she filled in the gaps. At one point, the officer asked her, "Are you her guardian?" She looked at me for a beat, then said without hesitation, "I am now." My chest tightened. By the end of the day, I had a stamped receipt, a temporary passport application in processing, and a scheduled return appointment. Alina held my hand the whole walk back to the bus. We didn't talk much on the ride home, but when we returned, and I stepped back into that modest house filled with soup scents and radio music, I felt something I hadn't in days. Stability. Not the kind you earn or beg for. The kind someone just gives because they believe you deserve it. That night, I helped Alina with dinner, slicing vegetables while she rolled out dough. We didn't talk about the embassy. We talked about music, about rainstorms, about how Valencia used to be nothing but orange groves. I didn't cry once. When I went to bed, I whispered a single word into the quiet room. "Gracias." It didn't sound like enough, but I think it was a start. It started with music. I couldn't sleep that night again. Not from fear this time, but from something stranger, calm. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, tracing the floral pattern on the quilt when I heard it, soft acoustic guitar drifting in from the living room. A tender, hesitant rhythm like someone unsure whether to play for themselves or someone else. I crept out of bed and padded down the hallway barefoot. The light was dim. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, his sketchbook beside him, the guitar cradled casually in his lap. He looked up, surprised. "Did I wake you?" I shook my head. "No. I couldn't sleep." He gestured to the spot beside him. "I was just messing around." I hesitated, then sat. "I didn't know you played," I said. He smiled. "Only when I'm avoiding drawing." I glanced at the sketchbook. "Is that what you were working on?" He flipped it closed. "Yeah, I'm putting together a new portfolio. Art school's way more competitive here than back home." Back home still caught me off guard. "Where in the States did you live?" "Seattle. Lived there until I was 15. Then my dad left, and my mom wanted to come back here where her family was." There was no bitterness in his voice, just fact. I studied his profile. "Do you miss it?" "Sometimes I miss the rain." He laughed. "Ironic, I know, but I also miss American sarcasm. Spanish humor doesn't always hit the same." I smiled. "So that's why you keep making weird jokes at breakfast." "Exactly." He grinned. Finally, someone gets it. We lapsed into a comfortable silence. Then slowly he asked, "Do you want to talk about it? Your parents, I mean." I stiffened, not because I didn't want to, because I wasn't sure I remembered how. "I've told myself so many versions of what happened," I began slowly. "That they panicked, that it was a heat-of-the-moment thing, that they didn't really mean to leave me." I stared at the floor. "But they did. They chose it, not once, not by accident. They planned it." Noah said nothing. He just listened. I breathed in deeply. It wasn't the first time they made me feel like a burden, but it was the first time they made it so literal. Like, "We're done carrying you, figure it out." My voice shook. And the worst part is I still wanted them to come back, even after everything. He put down the guitar, then said softly, "Wanting them to be better than they are doesn't make you weak. It means you still hope." I looked at him. "I used to be that kid too," he said. "Kept thinking if I just did everything right, they'd treat me better." A beat passed. "They didn't," he added. That shared truth settled between us. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. He reached for the sketchbook again, flipping to a page near the middle. "Wanna see?" The sketch was of cliffs, tall, jagged, and kissed by foam. The ocean below was wild, alive with motion even in graphite. I stared at it, breath caught. "Is that near here?" I asked. He nodded. "It's about 20 minutes from the house. I go there when I need to clear my head. Want to see it tomorrow." I surprised myself by saying yes without hesitation. "Cool," he said, shutting the book. "Bring shoes you don't mind getting muddy." Back in bed, I thought about how easily he'd offered that space. No pressure, no strings, just someone quietly saying, "I'll show you where I go when I don't know what to do. And maybe, if I was lucky, I'd figure out where I went to." The cliffs were even more breathtaking in person. The next afternoon, Noah led me down a winding path through wild grass and low stone walls until we reached a ridge that dropped dramatically into the sea. The sky was endless. The wind wrapped around us, loud and comforting at once. He set his sketchbook on a rock and started drawing while I sat nearby, hugging my knees and staring out at the horizon. "You ever feel like the world is too big to hold your pain?" I asked suddenly. He didn't stop sketching. "Sometimes. But then I come here and realize maybe that's the point." I turned toward him. "It's not about holding it all," he said. "It's about letting it echo out until it doesn't feel so heavy." We stayed there until the sun started sinking, painting the water in golds and purples. When we walked back, I felt lighter, not healed, not fixed, but understood. That night after dinner, Alina handed me a small notepad and said, "Time to learn your first important Spanish word." She wrote it in bold black ink. "Gracias." I smiled, because I already knew what it meant. But now I felt it. The embassy called the next morning. I was helping Alina hang fresh linens on the patio line when Noah walked out, holding the cordless phone with a strange look on his face. "It's for you," he said gently. "Embassy line." My stomach dropped. It had only been a few days since we'd submitted the paperwork, but part of me hoped, naively, that it was just a routine update. Maybe my passport was ready early. Maybe someone found my ID. Maybe, just maybe, this new life was finally going to solidify. I pressed the phone to my ear, heart thudding. "Hello." At first, only static. Then a voice I'd spent my entire life learning to obey. "Madeline, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I froze. It was my father. The embassy officer must have passed him through under some pretense, or maybe he'd called and manipulated his way onto the line. Either way, he was here, his voice booming, acidic, alive. "Do you really think you can run off and shack up with some strangers? Do you know how insane this looks?" I couldn't speak. "I called the embassy, told them I want you sent home immediately. You're 23, Maddie, not 30. You're not out in the world making decisions for yourself. You're coming home." He said it like a law, like a commandment carved in stone. I swallowed. "You abandoned me." "Don't start that again," he snapped. "We were trying to teach you a lesson, and you escalated it. You think we're just going to let you throw your life away with some poor Spanish artist and his bleeding heart mother?" I blinked. "How do you even know? We have eyes. People saw you. There's a record, you know. And if you don't come back, we'll file a report, claim abduction. You want those people charged. You want your little rescuers dealing with police." His voice was calm now, calculating. The kind of calm that always preceded something cruel. "You're not staying there, Madeline," he said firmly. "This ends today." I heard myself say, "No." He paused. "What did you say?" "No," I repeated, louder this time. "You don't get to control me from another country. You're not thinking clearly. We'll take legal action." "You already took action," I snapped. "You left me on a street in a foreign city with nothing but a wrinkled map and a crushed heart. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." His tone shifted, less fire, more ice. "You'll regret this." The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my hands shaking. Alina had stepped out onto the patio and was watching me, quietly folding a towel. I placed the phone down slowly on the table, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth. The air smelled like orange blossoms and laundry detergent. So clean, so far from the war zone that lived in my blood. They threatened to file a report, I said, my voice still shaky. Said I was abducted. Said they'd press charges if I didn't come back. Alina raised one eyebrow. They think you are a child. I don't know what they think. I don't think they do either. She walked over and placed both hands gently on my shoulders. Listen to me. You are not property. You are not lost luggage they can reclaim with paperwork. A tear escaped down my cheek. They're used to control, no, she said. To the world bending when they bark, but not you, not anymore. Later that day, Noah drove me back to the embassy for clarification. I clutched the folder of documents against my chest like armor. The woman at the counter this time was different, mid-40s, efficient and calm. I got a call earlier, I explained. From my father. He said he was filing something against the family I'm staying with, said he could force me to return. She didn't even blink. You're an adult. As long as you're not reported missing or in danger, you're free to stay where you wish. There's no abduction case to file. But he said, she leaned in slightly, voice low but firm. Let me guess, your parents don't like losing control. I blinked. You're not the first, she said. We see this more than you think, especially with young women trying to break free. That night, I sat in the courtyard with Noah, our backs against the garden wall, the stars blinking into place one by one. I don't know why it still hurts, I admitted. Because hope dies slower than love, he said quietly. I turned to him. And because no matter how awful they are, there's always a version of them we wish could come back. I nodded. He didn't say anything more, just reached for my hand and held it, not like someone claiming me, but like someone saying, I'm still here. And for the first time in my life, I realized that was enough. By morning, the fear had thinned into something else, resolve. It didn't come in a grand speech or a dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, like the way sun dries rain off cobblestones. Gradual, gentle, unstoppable. At breakfast, I found Alina already flipping tortillas in the pan, humming a Spanish lullaby. Noah sat at the table with his laptop open, reading from a government webpage. They can't force anything, he said, scrolling. You're legally an adult. You're not under any conservatorship, and unless a judge in Spain agrees you're in danger, your parents' threats are meaningless. I blinked. They made it sound so final, like they could just call someone and drag me back. They count on you not knowing your rights, Alina said, sliding a tortilla onto my plate. But now you do. She handed me a pen and a fresh notebook. Write it down, she added, so you can remember when they call again. I hesitated, then wrote, I am not theirs, I am mine. The words looked awkward at first, foreign in my own handwriting, but then I underlined them. Twice. Later that day, we went to a neighborhood cafe where Alina had a friend who worked in legal services. Marta was tall and no-nonsense, her hair tied back and her voice sharp with purpose. She reviewed everything, my passport forms, the notes from the embassy, even my father's threats. They're full of it, she said, sipping her espresso. Unless they have evidence of danger or coercion, Spain won't lift a finger. And even if they try to file something with U.S. authorities, you're not missing. You're in contact. And no crime has occurred. I let out a shaky breath. Marta looked at me kindly. They're bluffing and scared because they know what losing control looks like. Back at the house, Noah and I sat under the lemon tree, passing a sketchbook back and forth. Draw something, he said. I'm not good at drawing. That's the point. So I sketched, badly, a wobbly coastline, a tiny figure at the edge of a cliff. He looked over my shoulder and smiled. She looks brave. She looks alone, I said softly. She looks free, he corrected. That night I made the decision, not to disappear, not to hide, but to live. I told Alina I wanted to stay, not just until the drama died down, not just until the fear passed. I wanted to build something, learn the language, maybe volunteer, maybe even find work. You want to live here? She asked, brows raised. I nodded. I want to belong somewhere, and this feels like somewhere. She didn't cry. She just pulled me into a hug and whispered, then let's make it happen. By the end of the week, we had submitted an application for temporary residency. Alina knew someone at the cultural center who offered free Spanish lessons. She signed me up. I bought a small notebook with a bright orange cover and labeled it Mi Nueva Vida, my new life. I practiced everyday grocery store phrases, verbs, restaurant vocabulary. Noah quizzed me during lunch. Como se dice, thank you? He asked one day, grinning. Gracias, I replied, smirking. He nodded. See, you're fluent. Alina pulled me into community life like I'd always been there, introducing me to neighbors, letting me help sort donations for local drives, showing me how to make proper paella. People greeted me now. By name, I wasn't just passing through. One night, sitting on the rooftop with Noah, watching the stars, he said, "You're different now." I raised an eyebrow. Different how? You're not flinching every time your phone rings. You laugh without checking if someone's watching. You take up space. I looked at him. Do you really think I've changed? I think, he said, you've finally arrived in your own life. Something in me cracked open at that. I didn't respond, just leaned against him and let the silence wrap around us, because he was right. I was still me, still scarred, still cautious, still carrying echoes of voices that once defined me. But for the first time, I wasn't trying to survive anyone else's story. I was writing my own. Mornings began with Spanish flashcards and coffee on the patio. I'd never liked routines before, always found them stifling, like expectations disguised as structure. But here, they felt different. Chosen. Mine. El pan está en la mesa, I read aloud, grinning. Alina clapped from the sink. Perfecto. Tomorrow we try verbs. Afternoons were for helping her organize donation drives. Boxes of clothes, old toys, bags of rice. She introduced me to everyone like I belonged, like I hadn't dropped into their lives mid-crisis. "This is Madeline," she'd say proudly. "She speaks a little, but her heart speaks plenty." And they'd smile and nod and sometimes hug me too tightly, but I didn't mind. I was building a life from the inside out. Noah and I grew closer in that gentle, unspoken way people do when no one is rushing. He took me to bookshops, hidden bakeries, the quiet cove where he'd learned to swim. We laughed about American cereal commercials and argued about music genres. It wasn't romance dipped in desperation. It was quiet admiration. A choosing, not a clinging. One night, as we walked along the cliffs, he pointed at the stars and said, "You don't orbit around anyone anymore." I smiled. "Neither do you," I replied, and I meant it. Alina and I started a Sunday ritual, setting up tables for the local food drive at the plaza. Children would run up with sticky fingers and wide eyes, and she'd let them help stack canned goods while I practiced greetings. "Hola, buenas tardes," I'd say, proud of every syllable. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The neighbors began waving when I passed. The grocer knew my name. Even the woman at the pharmacy who never smiled handed me my vitamins last week with a quiet "Gracias, guapa." It all felt impossibly tender. But it wasn't just about being needed anymore. It was about choosing to show up. One night, Noah found me sitting in the garden, notebook in hand, half a page filled with messy thoughts and half-erased doodles. He sat beside me without asking, the glow from the kitchen window lighting the edges of his face. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just thinking." "About home." I took a breath. "I used to think home was supposed to be where your parents were," I said slowly. "But maybe it's where people don't ask you to shrink." Noah didn't say anything. He just reached out and gently laced his fingers with mine. No pressure, no declarations, just presence. And in that stillness I realized, love didn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it arrived in shared silence, in familiar voices calling you by name, in warm soup and handwritten notes and folded laundry that nobody owed you. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And I wasn't afraid of what came next. Not really. Not even when the past would inevitably come calling again, because now I had something to stand on, and I knew who I was. It was late, almost midnight, when my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't saved but recognized instantly. I stood in the kitchen alone, the window cracked open to let in the lavender-scented breeze. I stared at the screen for too long before answering. "Madeline." My mother's voice was thick, watery. "Oh, thank God we didn't think you'd pick up." I said nothing. "We were just talking about you. I saw a photo someone posted. You looked so thin. Are you eating enough? You know how your body gets under stress." "I'm fine," I cut in calmly. She sniffled. "Your father and we didn't mean for things to go so far. It was never supposed to be permanent. We just wanted to scare you, make you see how serious we were." Silence. Then she whispered, "We miss you. Please come home." I closed my eyes. A few months ago, I would have folded at that. Guilt was always their sharpest blade, wrapped in softness, spoken through trembles. the kind of apology that made me feel cruel for hesitating, but not now. "You didn't scare me," I said quietly. "You left me. And then you threatened the only people who helped me." "Sweetheart, we were afraid," she cried. "You disappeared, you didn't answer. I disappeared because you walked away laughing while I stood in the street with no money, no ID, no way home. I disappeared because I had no choice." She went quiet. I waited. Then her voice returned, smaller. "We just want our daughter back." I breathed in slowly, pressing my palm flat to the cool counter. "I've built something here," I said. "A life, a real one. I'm not that scared girl anymore. But we're your family." "No," I said softly. "You were, and I begged for that to mean something, but now I know family isn't who shares your name, it's who shows up when the storm hits, who stays." I heard her inhale sharply. "Then so that's it, you're choosing them." "I'm choosing me." A sob cracked through the line. I ended the call. My hand trembled, but only for a moment. Behind me, I didn't even hear Noah step into the room. He just rested a hand on my shoulder, silent, grounding. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. Instead, I stood there in the kitchen, the air thick with jasmine and salt from the sea, and felt something I hadn't in years. Freedom. The embassy felt different this time. Not colder or harsher, but final. Like a doorway I'd approached too many times in fear, now standing open with no one blocking the threshold. Noah waited beside me in the quiet lobby, his sketchbook in his lap, tapping a pencil softly against his knee. I glanced at him and he smiled. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. Inside, the consular officer greeted me with a clipboard and a familiar, efficient tone. "Residency application, final signatures. And congratulations, Miss Porter." Miss Porter. The name still stung a little, but less than before. I took the pen with steady fingers and signed my name across the final line. Madeline Lee Porter. When I looked up, Noah was already standing. "You did it," he said. I let out a shaky laugh. "It doesn't feel real yet." "It will," he replied. "It's your life now, not a reaction, a choice." We stepped outside into the Valencia sunlight, the breeze warm, the plaza alive with voices and the clatter of shoes on stone. The embassy's doors clicked shut behind us. And then my phone buzzed again, a video call, my parents. Noah glanced at the screen. "You don't have to." "I know." But I answered anyway. Their faces appeared, my mother red-eyed, my father stiff-jawed beside her. "I saw the paperwork came through," he said without preamble. My mom's voice wavered. "Maddie, please, we don't want this to be permanent. We were scared. We didn't know how far you'd go." "I went far enough to find peace," I said quietly. Her eyes widened. "You're really going to do this?" "I already did." I saw it then, the flicker in their faces, not just anger, not just shock, but something closer to grief. Because they realized too late that I wasn't coming back, and I didn't need their permission to stay gone. "I hope someday you understand what this cost me," I said. Then I hung up. The phone trembled slightly in my palm, but I wasn't shaking. Noah reached over and took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. I turned to him and smiled, not with defiance, not with rage, with relief, because this time the ending wasn't theirs to write. 1 year later, I stood barefoot on the cliffs, the sea wind braiding through my veil. The same cliffs where I once sat, unsure of who I was or where I belonged. Today they held me like a friend, steady, familiar, eternal. Noah stood across from me, wearing a linen shirt that danced in the breeze, his smile soft, unwavering. We hadn't rushed. There was no desperate clinging, no need to prove anything to anyone. We built something brick by brick, word by word, shared meal by shared sunrise. And now, we stood here choosing each other, not because we had to, because we could. Alina arranged the chairs, the flowers, the music. Her hands had shaped every part of this day. She cried openly during the vows, pressing a handkerchief to her heart. Marta, the legal advisor who'd once reassured me of my rights, handed me a small envelope after the ceremony. Inside was a simple certificate, Residentia Permanente, my permanent residency. "It's official now," she whispered with a grin. "Spain claims you." Later, under string lights and laughter, I pulled out one final envelope. Inside was a photo. Noah and I, framed by the cliffs and the ocean, smiling like two people who knew what it meant to be broken and brave. On the back, I wrote 4 words: "I found peace here." I mailed it without a return address. Not out of spite, not even for closure, but as a quiet ending to a story that no longer belonged to them. I chose a new beginning. And this time I was the author.